I don't know. Say it with me. I don't know. Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. And so we observe the world, we see what happened, and then we define the thing that happened as the reason the thing happened. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. Maybe even ask them about that thing that they've created, because to them, it's immensely valuable. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We have no other choice. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 126 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Dr. Bob and I interviewed Jen Senko. She wrote and directed a documentary called The Brainwashing of My Dad. Here's the trailer for the film.
In the 1960s, Jen Senko's dad never had a bad word to say about any race, or people, or person.
Then in the 80s, after my dad discovered talk radio during a long commute to work, he suddenly didn't like black people, poor people, gay people, feminists, Hispanics, and especially Democrats. After he discovered Fox News, they became the enemy.
What happened to Dad?
The great story here, for anybody willing to find it and write about it and explain it, is this vast right-wing conspiracy. But it has not yet been fully revealed to the American public.
By the 70s and the 80s, the media had been taken over by the extreme right.
Homosexual marriage is such a threat to civilization itself.
Fox News came along.
Mass murder committed by immigrants.
God controls the climate. Come on!
In asking the question, what happened to her dad, it was really like asking what happened to our media. And in asking what happened to our media, it was really like asking what happened to our country.
Jen's documentary and the effect that political pundits and talking heads have on the human psyche brings up a fascinating subject, especially relevant in view of the election of Donald J. Trump to the highest office in the world, or at least it was until he took it. The catastrophe has so stupefied people that we're finally talking about the elephant in the room, fake news, and its ability to influence people to vote against their own self-interest or their own conscience or whatever decency they have left after 30 years of right-wing propaganda. This really is a fascinating conversation. I fell in love with Jen Senko. There are several nuggets of unique dialogue here and a few at my expense. I love this episode, and I hope you will too. More information about Jen Senko is available in the show notes of this episode, including links to the movie The Brainwashing of My Dad. We taped this conversation on October 30th, 2016. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast, or give it 5 stars, or leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Our show's available on most podcast platforms. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge $1 per episode or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or you can leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated. Our Indiegogo fundraiser is over as of this taping. We raised $530. We were trying to raise $1,600 for 3 new microphones and 3 boom arm mic stands. We raised enough for the mic stands and with a head start towards the mics. My thanks to everyone who donated. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode is by Sam Mayer, recorded on a handpan in the New York City subway. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
Hey, Jen.
Hi.
So, Jen, where are you now? Are you in L.A. or New York or?
Oh, no, I'm home. I live in New York.
In New York?
I live in Manhattan.
Cool.
I live in Soho, not because I'm rich, but because I was there before it became anything.
Yeah. That's a beautiful place to live. Great area.
It really is. I think I'm really lucky. I think I live on one of the best streets in the world.
How long you been there?
Since prehistoric time.
Oh.
I guess like since 1982.
Wow, how about that?
So, Jen, we're going to take this show in 2 parts. First part is we're going to get your religious backstory.
Okay.
And then the second part, we're going to talk about this documentary that you made.
Okay.
So let's start with your religious childhood.
Okay. Well, it was actually kind of religious. My parents weren't terribly religious. My grandmother was. And I was brought up Catholic. And for some reason, I took it very seriously when I was a kid. Except I do remember having doubts in 5th grade. I was going to catechism school. After regular school, you'd go to catechism class. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading in the catechism that the Pope was infallible. And I stopped there and I said, well, how could the Pope be infallible? Because we were taught that man was fallible and the Pope is a man. So I remember that didn't ring with me. And then I had to have Sister Maria make me put my gum on my nose for the rest of my class because I was talking. That didn't help. But
well, let me just back up and applaud you as a young child for seeing the contradiction of an infallible Pope.
Yeah.
I think that's genius, and it's right under our noses. I to this day I just have no clue. I look at the whole church with just awe and wonder why anybody gives a flying fuck about anything that they have to say about anything.
Yeah.
It's just why do we elevate them to such?
I know. I don't know, but maybe because they have so much money. But I do like this new popey. He's really cool.
Yeah, well, as far as popes go, for sure.
Yeah.
He's still anti-contraception. Yeah. He's still misogynist.
Is he misogynist?
Hell yeah. Well, he's a part of an institution that's one of the most misogynist organizations under the sun.
Yeah.
So
I give him a pass though because he's Catholic. So for a Catholic, he's pretty good.
Oh, for a Catholic. Okay. I
see how far we have to lower the bar?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm going to quit bashing your childhood religion and
Oh no, I don't care. I always when I meet people and I say, what religion are you or were you? And they say Catholic. I say, I'm very sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to hear that.
One of the things that came up in our correspondence was that, and you already mentioned that your grandmother was actually the most religious person in your life, in your childhood, and she used to have visions.
Yeah,
really?
She did. She had visions and predicted deaths. And so I was, more impressed by her. Uh-huh. Like the nuns didn't impress me. And also because I knew other kids that read the Bible in their Bible class. So I was wondering, well, why aren't we reading the Bible? Uh-huh. So I thought it was more about, the Catholic religion itself. And also my other friends, like Methodists, their churches were more fun. Like I just thought being Catholic, I hated all the standing and sitting. It was so tiring as a Catholic.
Yeah. And all for what?
Well,
Yeah, it was just torture.
Well,
But
describe some of the visions that, if you remember, that your grandmother had.
Yeah, I can't forget them. I guess the biggest one was about her husband dying, my grandfather, who I never met, where he got up for breakfast and sat down in a chair and never got up. And then a week later, she went into the kitchen, saw that he was boiling an egg on the stove and was wondering why he didn't turn the light off, and went into his bedroom. They slept in different bedrooms. And he was slumped over in the chair and had died of a heart attack. So that really impressed me as a child. And by the way, they slept in different bedrooms because he was 15 years older than she and was married once before. And after 3 kids, she decided that the church wouldn't forgive her for continuing to have conjugal relations. So
with an adulterer?
Well, with...
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh.
Yeah, because the Catholic Church, didn't let you get divorced. And he was divorced. So I know. A priest had told her, you can't take the sacraments as long as you're still sleeping with your husband.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was, which was even worse. She wanted to be able to receive the sacraments.
So she was a real believer then, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah.
She wasn't saying, yeah, we don't sleep together. She was actually doing it.
You're right.
Yeah. Wow.
Right.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking. That really, like, a priest in a way broke up their marriage.
Yeah.
Well,
the priest is a dick because he can't have sex and he doesn't want anybody else having sex.
Yeah, nobody has any fun.
yeah, just a resentful old guy.
Yeah.
But
so those visions and others, I would guess, she was able to see. Was it just your grandpa's death that she saw, or could she?
No. My Uncle Harold, who I never met.
Huh.
I don't remember all the details if he was sick or something, but at 3 a.m. she woke up in the morning, her bed was shaking, and she heard like all this tapping at the window. It sounded like birds tapping at the window, and her bed shaking, and she said, "Oh, Harold, stop," because he was a tease. Her brother was always a tease. So she said, "Oh, Harold, stop." And then the next morning, she found out that he died at, 3 a.m. and around the time that she woke up and said this. So she heard of she called it the tapping of angel wings on the. So all this imagery was just beautiful, fascinating, and moving to me. And I loved my grandmother very, very much. We were very close.
Wow.
She was a lot of fun. So I really took that to heart. I guess, in my little head, I was thinking, well, there's something wrong with this church and Sister Maria.
But Grandma, she's got it, man. She's cool.
Yeah, Grandma's keyed in somehow.
Wow.
Well, let's shift gears and where did you go to? Did you go to college anywhere?
Yeah, I went to Pratt.
Oh, good school. Great school.
Yeah, it really was.
Mm-hmm.
For the first time in my life, I worked really, really, really hard. I learned what hard work was and really dedicating yourself.
What did you study there?
Well, see, I actually studied communications, but I didn't mean to. What happened is, I'll just back up a little bit. When I graduated high school, I was sort of rebellious. I didn't really want to go to school, but my father said, well, you either have to get a job or take a couple college courses. So I took some college courses, and one of them was painting. I'd never painted before. And the second painting I did, the school offered to buy for their permanent collection.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I was like, I guess I got a talent. I knew I could always draw, but suddenly I was in love with painting, and then kind of lost interest in everything else but painting and just said, I just want to see how good I can be. I want to push myself to the limit. So I looked at some of the best schools, and Pratt was one of them. But I didn't want to take painting because I felt, maybe my father said, well, how are you going to make a living off of that? I don't know. I was selling my paintings, but I wanted to take fashion illustration. I loved fashion and I loved drawing. And then when I got there mid-year in January. Pratt told me, "Oh, we forgot to tell you we discontinued that
major."
Yeah, that major, and you'll have to pick another." And it's like, oh, reach into the hat and decide your life. So they said, "Do you want to take fashion design?" I was like, "No, I'm not interested in that at all. That's totally different. I'm interested in art." And I said, "How can I make a living?" They said, "Well, you can take communications," which was like graphic design, and then we'll let you take all of the fashion illustration courses that you want, because we kind of, goofed up there and didn't tell you. So then I had an even goofier major because I was half in and half out of communications, but that's okay.
Pretty cool. I mean, you could take anything you want then, so that's nice. Kind of construct it the way you want it, almost.
Yeah, it did work to my advantage. So I took some painting, and I probably more than the communications students would have taken, and more fashion illustration classes. Yeah.
So how did that turn into wanting to make movies?
It's funny. I lost interest in painting along the way because I always, to make it short, is I wanted to make messages that people would see. I wanted to communicate, and I felt like painting was not clear enough and wouldn't really communicate my ideas enough, and I wouldn't be able to learn or understand things more by painting. So I almost saw it as superficial to me, to my needs. Not that it is at all.
Well, painting doesn't change the world like making documentaries does.
Right. So, I tried all kinds of things. In my 30s, I even tried singing country western songs for a while. Patsy Cline with my friend Bill Plimpton, because he played the guitar.
Oh, Bill Plimpton, the author, Bill Plimpton?
No, Bill Plimpton, the famous animator, Academy Award nominee animator.
Okay.
He had stuff on the side that he liked to do too, and one of them was like playing music, and he'd play guitar. We'd go over and jam. It was fun.
So one of the documentaries, how many documentaries have you made?
3.
Okay. Well, the one that we want to talk about today especially, and I'd like to hear about the others, but the premise of our show is we talk to people about deconstructing their faith. And one of the ways that I deconstructed was not only theologically, with doctrines and issues of the scriptures and whether there's a God or whether there's a hell or whether Jesus was literally the Son of God, etc. But I was simultaneously, I found that my parallel to my theological deconstruction was a political deconstruction. And when Bill Clinton became president, the night he was elected, I was sitting in my living room, and I was so fundamentalist Christian and right-wing that I, just like a lot of people this next week, by the time this show comes out, the election's going to be behind us, but we're taping this on October 30th.
Right.
So we don't know who's going to win, but I know there's a lot of people that are so afraid of both.
Yes.
Like, if Clinton becomes president, there are people that are going to freak the fuck out.
I know.
If Trump becomes president, there's people going to freak the fuck out.
I know.
But when I was so afraid, I was a Fox News watcher, regular, back in what year that was, 92?
Yeah, 91, 92, in there somewhere, yeah.
So, November of 91, I guess it would be. And I sat there on my, and I freaked out when Clinton had won because he was the Antichrist as far as I was concerned because of the way Fox News framed it.
Right.
I got up and I took a walk around the block just praying my ass off, like, God, what are we going to do? God save us. I was so scared of Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
And I remained fairly right-wing all the way up till 2008. I voted for McCain. I was moving to the left, but I was still a Republican.
Right.
So I'm just saying that part of my deconversion from Christianity seems to, and I don't know if there's any correlation, but it seems to be parallel and simultaneously with my move to the left, where by 2012 I voted for Obama, and like today I would vote for Obama for another 4 years if I could. And and I'm more to the left than either he or Clinton, So
right. Were you for Bernie?
I was.
Yeah, me
initially.
too.
Yeah, very much. At one point I said Bernie or bust, and then I realized that that's not going to work either. So
yeah, you have to grow up a little bit.
So anyway, what's the name of your documentary? Is How Fox News Brainwashed My Dad, or how's it go?
High concept title, as they say.
No, it's called The Brainwashing of My Dad.
Okay, The Brainwashing of My Dad. It's available on iTunes and places, right? Like where people can download it?
Amazon.
It's on Amazon.
iTunes. Actually, this will probably be over by the time this runs, but there's a 99-cent election special running on iTunes and Amazon.
Yeah.
So, because we want as many people. Our goal was to have 1 million people see it before the election, and I don't know where we're at now, but yeah.
Well, Bob and I have both seen it. I've seen it twice, and it's an hour and a half long, and it's really well done. It's got so much more substance in it than I actually expected just from the title.
Great. Yeah.
There's so much history there as to how we got here. How did we get to the place where this propaganda machine was so effective and so powerful?
Right.
And it's just fantastic. So I don't know where you want to start, or Bob, if you have any questions.
Well, it's just I just like you, Cass. I found it interesting the notion of the John Birch Society, and going all the way back to McCarthyism and what have you, and to seeing the beginning of this tremendous right wing thing that happened, during the Eisenhower administration of all times, and then tracing that to Fox News. I thought that was
by way of Nixon and Reagan.
Just tracing it that way. Really a wonderful idea.
And the Tea Party.
Into the Tea Party.
The Tea Party, yeah.
Just great.
Thank you.
In 1964, Republican candidate Barry Goldwater had many Birch supporters. But this damaged him because, years earlier, word had leaked out that their founder, Robert Welch, had written a secret book branding sitting Republican president and World War II hero Dwight D. Eisenhower a communist. The Birches were labeled as nutty extremists. Goldwater and his platform were hammered by Lyndon Johnson. The right wing was declared dead. So they started to hit back. One of the most powerful ways was through creating their own media.
I first spotted David Brock in a documentary called The Hunting of the President. He had been a conservative operative involved in the organized effort of trying to take President Clinton down. But he came to regret it and wrote about what he learned from an insider's view. When I read his book, The Republican Noise Machine, I knew I had to talk to him. It took me 1.5 years to get him, but I finally got to interview David Brock.
One of the very first things that the conservative movement did in trying to get control of the debate in the country was to do that through the media. And they established a couple of different organizations that market the notion of liberal media bias to the public. And so one of them is called Accuracy in Media by someone named Rita Irvine, who had worked in the Nixon administration. And basically the idea behind this group was to counter their feeling that the media was opposed to Nixon's policies in Vietnam.
More certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate.
You could see how the campaign to discredit the media would lay the groundwork for a vast alternative media that would come later.
Roger Ailes understood that TV is about one thing. It's about emotion. And you need to communicate to the audience and hook into them on an emotional level. And Richard Nixon, who by all accounts was a very smart, a brilliant man who had a command of the issues, he couldn't connect with the audience. He came off as stiff, as shifty-eyed, as famously in the 1960 presidential debate against John Kennedy, he was sweating. It was a terrible performance. Then he meets Roger Ailes in 1968. At the time, Roger Ailes was a young producer, the wonderkind of television at the age of 26. And so Roger Ailes coached Richard Nixon on how to communicate those ideas to the average American who was watching television every night at dinner table. Richard Nixon, whose political career almost blew up because of television, was able to win the presidency because he mastered it. At the time, in the late 1960s, TV had finally become a mass medium, and yet there really weren't people who had decoded the medium.
Ailes was outlining a way to avoid, quote, the censorship, the priorities, and the prejudices of network news selectors and disseminators. Written in 1970, this memo talks about how television had become the most powerful news source because people are lazy and want their thinking done for them.
There was a real backlash in the elite centers of conservative power and corporate power. And one of the symbols of this backlash was a memo written by the general counsel, whose name was Lewis Powell.
It was starting to get really interesting. This confidential Lewis Powell memo was from August 1971, just a year after the Roger Ailes memo.
And so Lewis Powell wrote a memo to the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce saying Americans view business as the big bad guys and people like Ralph Nader as the heroes.
What he claimed is that the whole country is being taken over by the radical left, the government, the media, the universities, of course.
He said basically the following: we have a problem. Our best and brightest of our students do not want to become conservative businessmen. We have to change this. We have to get wealthy conservatives to put their money together to appoint professors in major universities to teach our principles. We have to set up and support organizations in major universities to do this. They said we can't trust the universities. We have to set up our own research establishments, which became the think tanks. We have to make sure that they get published. Start journals, start publishing houses so they can publish their books. And we have to buy media so their ideas can get out.
These were right-wing think tanks putting forward stuff that basically wasn't academically sound or intellectually sound, but had good propaganda value. Powell, after writing the memo, was appointed by Nixon to be on the Supreme Court. So they set up this infrastructure, and then ultimately it led to the right-wing media itself, where they were setting up their own channels of communication. And that was the big boom in right-wing talk radio nationally and across the country in every locale, and ultimately Fox News Channel.
Did you do a lot of research? Is that how did you stumble upon that notion? Like, we got to figure out where this came from.
It's a little bit of a story, if you'll indulge me.
Oh, absolutely.
So after the 2004 election, when Kerry, quote unquote, lost, I was devastated. I went into a little bit of a depression. And I started talking to this woman across the street who had a cafe in our little neighborhood. And I told her how I felt. And she said, "Oh, I can get you some people that would, that you'd have common interests with." And because I felt like we have to fight back, and we have to fight back against the media.
Now, what did you share with her that she said that? I mean,
well, I felt that Kerry was blindsided with the boat, with the swift boat.
Boating, yeah.
Seeing that frustrated me. Felt so much. I felt so helpless, and between my dad and then seeing that and it happening to the country, I just felt like I have to do something.
Well, let's back up and maybe unpack what were you witnessing in your dad? What were some telltale signs or worrisome signs for you?
Well, one thing, we were having email arguments all the time. Like, he was telling me, there should be no minimum wage.
And he wasn't always like that. He wasn't always right-wingy.
No, my dad was such a loving, open-minded person. If you see the movie, you'll see one of the, examples where he stop and talk to an African-American homeless person. You know, my mother was always hurrying him along because he would just talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Especially if they spoke in another language. He loved that because he spoke about 7 different languages. He was an intelligent guy. He had his master's in engineering, but he was a little gullible, you know, unlike my mom. A little naive in some ways.
So was it a commute or something that he started listening to Rush Limbaugh on the radio, and then you started seeing a change in him that was concerning?
Yes, Bob Grant, that was the first one. And,
big name in New York City, big conservative.
See, I'd
name.
never heard of that before.
Bob Grant, oh man.
Is it before, before my time?
Get Castro, get Castro. That's what he would say at the, he was a nasty old fart.
He finally got fired because, who was it that...
he called black savages.
Black savages, and there was a small plane carrying some Congress people, and one of them had a black member on it. I forget the name right now. And the plane crashed, and he said, "Oh, I hope it's, you know, that Negro." And sure enough, it was him. And people were just finally like, you know, get this guy off the radio. But yeah, so he started listening to him. You know, I'm sure he didn't, like, my dad just thought, well, let's talk. It'll keep me company. And just very gradually, he started to change. And he started saying things against minorities, which shocked me. And he knew all my gay friends. He started saying things against gay people.
Feminazis?
Oh, yeah, feminazis.
Oh, I mean,
once he got the rash, yeah.
God forbid, like he would say to my mother and all my aunts, like, what are you girls doing in the kitchen there? You know, and I'd say women, not girls, women. And he would just get so mad at me. And then in SUVs, my dad was so cheap growing up. He could squeeze a nickel to the buffalo crapped, okay? So he made us keep track of every cent, and I mean cent, that we put gasoline in the car, the family car. He had a little booklet. Okay. So one day when he picked me up from the bus station, I had come down from New York to visit, and he said something about SUVs, or maybe I did, I don't remember, like, oh, all these SUVs on the road. And he just got furious. And he said, people should be allowed to drive SUVs. The next car I'm going to get is an SUV. You know, I'm like wondering, like, where is this coming from?
Who are you and what have you done with my dad?
Exactly. Like the pod people, the invasion of the body snatchers. Like, really, it was like talking to somebody who was possessed.
Okay, so you're at the coffee shop and you've already got these concerns of what you're seeing happen to your dad's metamorphosis, and then Carrie loses on a whim that should have been debunked in real time.
Right.
And you express this to her, and she says back to you, what is it?
She said, you know, I know a lot of people in the hood that feel the same way. I'll help get you a group together. So she invited all these people in my neighborhood that I hadn't met before, and we started a media watchdog group called PRISM, People's Response to Inefficient Subservient Media.
Great.
Wait a second, I got to get that again. PRISM. People's Response
to Inefficient Subservient Media.
What's subservient about it?
Oh, maybe to the corporate class or something.
To the corporations.
Okay. I got it. All right. Yeah. All right. My bad.
And the trickle down theory of economics.
Yeah.
So we started like observing it and writing letters. And unfortunately, the letter writing mainly came down to Steve, the writer. Eventually, Steve the writer. Now, there's just about 8 of us, you know. Steve the writer, after about a year, got tired of being the one to mainly write. So somehow, we started watching documentaries. So for 4 years, it turned into like a documentary club. And so I watched hundreds of documentaries, and I learned so much from them, all the while, like, I watched The Hunting of the President and learned about David Brock, who may be unpopular now because of what he did for Hillary against Bernie, but whatever, he was very knowledgeable. He was on the inside of this right-wing media machine and blew the whistle and described what was going on. So I just filled myself with as much knowledge as I could. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I said, I got to make this movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting. You know, my commute is what provoked me to start listening to podcasts galore, because I drive to Nashville. It's an hour and a half one way every day. And then after listening to hundreds of podcasts, I was moved to make one of my own. So in your case, after listening to hundreds of documentaries, you're like, I can do this, you know?
Well, no, I didn't think I could do this.
Okay.
I was scared to death. I mean, the first documentary I did, Roadmap Warrior Women, that was more like, oh, okay, I can't do this thing with a paintbrush, so I'll pick up a camera. I wanted to find out how other women got so independent, because I didn't feel like I was independent enough the way, you know, growing up in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And then the second one, a friend of mine kind of said, well, you've got experience in documentaries. Why don't you help me make The Vanishing City, about all of the luxurification that's going on in New York City. In the meantime, I kept thinking, I got to make The Brainwashing of My Dad. I got to make but it was intimidating to me. But I think I really cut my teeth on the last one, The Vanishing City, where, you know, my co-director would push me some, and we interviewed tons of people, and, you know, I just really felt much more confident. And I just, and you know what? I also, you know, I had worked for major corporations in the presentations department, and they kept downsizing. So eventually we were freelance. And then I kept getting fired from these temp jobs. So I was like, this is can I say bad words?
Oh, sure.
Okay, this is a fucking sign. Shit or get off the pot, make this movie.
Uh-huh.
And one day at a screening of The Vanishing City, one of the last few times it screened, an older woman documentary filmmaker, I was talking to her and I said, I got to figure out what I can do to make money while I do The Brainwashing of My Dad. You know, I can't bartend because I can't hear, and I can't add. I keep getting fired from my other jobs. And she just looked at me and said, raise money for the film. Like it was the most logical thing in the world. And to me, it was like another sign, if you will, or if you won't, you know.
from the universe.
Religion, yeah, from the universe, from whatever. The spirit of my grandma, I don't know.
Go with that, sure.
But I'm like, oh, okay.
And because there were so many people who related to that story and were impassioned by the sadness or the horror of losing their parents or loved ones to this mega machine, media machine, that enough people were willing to throw in the coffers or crowdsource it?
That's right. That's right.
Which crowdsourcing did you use for that?
Well, first I had saved $10,000 on my own. I was always a good saver, a little chip off my dad, the old block, you know, my dad. So I could start with that and made a trailer and then went to Kickstarter. And before I knew it, within 30 days, I had close to 1,000 backers, and stories started pouring out of the woodwork.
So how much did you raise?
I was asking for 11,000 and I made 45,000.
Excellent.
Yeah. So you hit a nerve. I think
I hit a nerve.
Yeah.
I hit a nerve.
Well, you hit a nerve with me because my mom, you know, my father passed away 30 years ago, and what's interesting, he was Republican, but he was a heart. What do you call? I mean, he was a compassionate. I mean, he cared about people, and so in many ways, he would be a Democrat today. I mean, I believe, and this is where my sisters and I disagree, probably, because I feel like I'm following in the footsteps of my father by going further left, especially the extreme right that they've taken it. It's just ridiculous.
Right. Republicans today, they're not what they were like 20, 30 years ago.
Not at all.
Republicans 30 years ago, 40 years ago are like Democrats today.
Yeah.
You know, centrist Democrats. I mean, it's this gradual push to the right has pushed us and the country so far to the right that we almost take for granted somebody like Donald Trump.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. We have. Or you know what I'm amazed is that when somebody, I think it was Norquist, comes along and says, "I want to drown the government in a bathtub."
Right.
It's like there's just there's no hiding. So like when Reagan said in the 80s, government is the problem, they took that and ran to the point where they want a third world country. Like I've been to Mexico. I've been to countries where there's a weak government. And they got sewers in the ditches and dirt roads and like there's no infrastructure, and you can't build a building trusting that it's going to survive an earthquake because of no codes and regulation. I mean, this is a shitty civilization when you have a small government. And here's Norquist saying, I want to drown the American government in a fucking bathtub. And he has no idea what anarchy he's talking about.
Yeah.
And why it gets so obsessive. How far right? It's just weird. The energy to push it further. Where's that fucking coming
it's
from?
Like anti-American almost, you know?
It is. They're traitors.
Oh, I totally believe it.
I will come out and say that. They're traitors dressed in the clothes of patriots. They
wrapped in a flag and carrying a cross.
That's right. Jesus would be rolling over and, well, he wouldn't be in the grave, but whatever.
On his cloud.
Rolling over in his togas.
At the right hand of the Father.
Yeah. And going WTF.
So you did these two documentaries, Roadmap Warrior Women, which sounds fun. The title sounds almost like Tina Turner in Road Warrior.
I'll send you a copy.
Okay. And then The Vanishing City, it sounds like it's about
gentrification.
Yeah.
It's beyond gentrification. I'll just say that it's luxurification.
Luxurification. That's a new word for me. And then all that time, you're building relationships with key grips and light people and camera people. I mean, just to me, I guess I don't, because the video portrays you as just your father's daughter. It's almost like you're the person that someone else is making a documentary about. But here, and yet you seem like a layperson is what I mean when it comes to the audiovisual community. And yet you've got all these skills and connections that this is your third one. So how did you get into this stuff? I guess you said you were working for major corporations in their presentation department.
Yeah, I'm a lot smarter than I look or act. I will say that.
I knew that's how that came across, but that's not what I meant. But
No. But you know what? I noticed that a lot of the people, some of the people that I interviewed with didn't really take me that seriously. I don't know how I even got to interview them.
Well, you're a humble person. You're modest, and so they don't realize they're talking to the director of the film. They just
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And you know, it's always been that way for me. I didn't make good grades in grade school, but that was largely because I was bored and I probably had ADD and was very social and just wanted to talk to people. But when I actually worked for a lot of major corporations, started a presentations department, and actually rose to vice president of one of the corporations. So that experience that I had with corporations was very helpful to me in learning how to handle other people. You know, you'd have to make deals with vendors. You know, you'd have to hire and fire people. You'd have to kind of govern over different personality types. You'd have to learn how to get what you want, even though that's not what, the higher ups wanted. So all of that really contributed to me making this film.
Right.
And, it was just me in the beginning producing. I got the people. I got most of the people. I did have help from wonderful friends. I mean, there were people who were fans of The Vanishing City, for instance. A friend of mine, Eileen, who was a writer, and she apparently had worked with Noam Chomsky and WBAI.
Oh, wow. That's why he's in the movie then, huh?
Yeah. And she just said to me, why don't you interview Noam Chomsky? I'm like, oh, I'll never be able to get him. And she said, just write up what you're doing because he's interested in the media. Here's his email. I'll introduce you and just see if he'll do it.
How about that? And Dr. Herman, too. You got him. Usually, sometimes they write together, Chomsky and Herman.
Ed Herman is the loveliest man. I had an all-woman crew, and my second camera person, who's a little older than me, was all over Edward Herman like a cheap suit. She was like, if I were 30 years older, I would be all over you. I mean, these two men, the greatest men, were so kind to me and were so nice to me.
That's so good to hear.
And they believed in me.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, they're two of the smartest people on the planet, and yet they've got these big hearts. That always, I've said it before on the show, I get a boner when I meet somebody that's got a big heart and a big mind.
Me too.
It's kind of rare because you've got a big mind. A lot of times you're kind of a cold heart.
Yeah.
Or if you've got a big heart, you're kind of a simpleton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're hitting the jackpot when you meet somebody with both.
Yeah. And the fact that they both liked me.
Well, what's not to like? That's what we're talking about here. Is you're so modest and so you're almost sheepish as far as the way that you approach. You're not flamboyant. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Flamboyant.
Yeah. Flamboyant, as in roasted lamb, or flamboyant?
God, it's flamboyant, isn't it?
Yeah.
I said it wrong.
Yeah. Did you actually say lamboyant?
I did. And I'm going to have to, I'll take that out.
Which is delicious.
No,
by the way. That's
you
what he
can't
means.
take that out.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
That's very cute.
See, I'm learning from you how to be self-deprecating.
That's right. So anyway, on you go with your with the program, and I noticed that you have as a producer Matthew Modine.
Yeah,
who's among the biggest. He's a big Hollywood star. He was just recently in this new Netflix show, The Strangers, Stranger Things. And we don't have a clue who he is yet. He's some kind of.
But how do you know him?
Well, again, that was like another miracle. I didn't mention before that I considered getting like Noam Chomsky and Edward S. Herman and, all these other people, little baby miracles. But,
sure.
Tie that into the religious factor again, whatever. But, I had been friends with Bill Plimpton all my life.
Right.
And Bill had been running a Kickstarter campaign at the same time. And I got help from this woman, Alexia Anastasia, who is an incredible self-promoter. And I said, look, can you help me? And she said, why don't you ask Bill if Adam, his producer, can put something on Bill's Kickstarter, like a little notice that you are running a Kickstarter too. And I said, I don't know, Adam. She said, just call Bill and pretend you do. And
wow, ballsy.
So I did. I said, hey, can Adam run something on the Kickstarter campaign? He says, Jennifer, how do you know Adam? I'm like, from Facebook. He's like, oh, okay. So anyway, Adam Rakoff is Matthew Modine's business partner. They have the production company Cinco Dedos Películas, and they produce like political short movies. They're activists. And so with Adam involved, Matthew saw the trailer, and next thing I know, I'm getting an email saying Matthew Modine wants to be involved. He doesn't have money, but he will do whatever he can to help. So I'm like, holy moly. And I mean, I had a crush on him since I saw the movie Birdie.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he's been around a long time. Wonderful actor. Yeah.
Wonderful actor, wonderful person, so ethical that even someone like Frank Luntz, he got me Frank Luntz, believe it or not.
Wow.
Matthew did. Even someone like Frank Luntz admires Matthew Modine because he said to me, he's the only person I know who lives what he talks about.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was curious about Luntz because when, did he know the nature of the film when he came on? Because he basically just revealed secrets.
I don't think he cared. And again, maybe he didn't take me that seriously. I don't know. Wow. But I know, this is interesting. What he wanted at the time was to get like a little educational film for the people that he was training. So he kept saying, why don't you meet me at my classroom? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And I think that's the only reason why he agreed. Well, the other reason is to, please Matthew. I ended up giving him 10 minutes of the film, where he said he talked about a lot of stuff that he wanted his trainees. So I guess he didn't know how to produce one of these things himself or was just too busy to.
So he could use the footage for himself?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably the deal, right?
Afterwards, he asked me.
Huh.
And, he was hinting about it before.
Mm-hmm. Right. But it's true what Cass said. He does reveal. I mean, he lets you know this is exactly what we're up to.
Okay, here's my story.
Yeah.
He's guilty, and this is like a guilt offering.
Really? You think so?
That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Okay. But I mean, guilty is a good way to put it. He knew exactly what he was doing. And how he was going to manipulate people's minds.
Probably.
And the words.
And probably, even though he probably had some idea, well, of course he did, because this is what he brings, is the knowledge of how words manipulate people.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's a degree in which there's no way that even he could have foreknown or predicted the degree to which the dumbass people of America would be steered like a ring in their nose by those words.
Maybe.
I agree. I think when I first saw him, I kind of thought, first like I hated him. I was like, oh, he helped,
destroy the country.
Helped destroy. And then when I met him and I saw him, not when I met him, but when I saw him a couple times being interviewed, I thought, and I read his review, his articles or things about him, I thought, oh, he's just a total word nerd, and he loves doing this stuff, and he's either oblivious or maybe he doesn't care. Mm-hmm. However, when I met him, I unfortunately felt like, oh, he really does believe this stuff, and he kind of does know what he's doing, and he does sort of put out this image, and I don't want to diss him because he was kind enough to let us into his home, and for that I'm really grateful. But I did think he should be a little ashamed of himself.
He should die. Yeah. But to balance that, you had George Lakoff on, and Lakoff is like the good side of Luntz. He's also a wordsmith and understands how those things work.
Yeah, but boy, don't tell that to Luntz. I compared him to Luntz when I was in the interview, and he got pissed off.
I bet. Yeah, he doesn't want to be like Luntz, that's for sure.
No, it was the other way around. Luntz was offended.
Luntz doesn't want to be like Lakoff.
Oh, wait, who was offended?
Luntz was offended that I said, well, Lakoff is the other side of you. And he was basically saying Lakoff is nowhere near me. I'm much superior to him.
Well, imagine how much money Luntz has made off of this.
Oh, yeah.
Tons.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's much wealthier, I'm sure, than Lakoff. That's for sure. Lakoff's a professor. So there we go.
Language is not neutral. In politics, it's anything but neutral. This became professionalized in 1994 when Newt Gingrich hired Frank Luntz.
Frank is the genius right-wing wordsmith who taught Republicans to, instead of saying estate tax, say death tax.
So you have managed to shift popular opinion on a lot of unpopular everyday concepts like inherited wealth by labeling it death tax.
I have fought over the validity of the death tax since I started working in this space. And I went out and tested it, and my God, it changed the dynamic of how people looked at policy.
Instead of saying poor people, say the takers. Did I say don't tax rich people? I meant encourage the job creators. What's the difference between drilling for oil and energy exploration? Nothing, except one sounds like something assholes do and one sounds like Indiana Jones. Did I say don't let black people vote? I meant clamp down on voter fraud. Healthcare reform, everyone likes that. Government takeover of healthcare.
So I asked them, which frightens you more, government control or government takeover? Oh, clearly government takeover. Well, I think it was 27 out of 30. That's it.
Once the word is decided on, every single Republican, from the presidential contenders on down to the feces throwers on hate radio, all chant it like Rain Man over and over until it's beaten into our skulls.
So I don't know that it'd be... Maybe, what do you think? I'm just thinking out loud here and we can take this out. But do you think that it would be better for our audience to not know the ending? Or would it make them want to go see it knowing that there was that ending?
Your ending on the film, you mean? Yeah.
Because it was kind of a twist at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, basically, we were trying to keep the ending a secret.
Yeah.
But, there's two different schools of thought. There's the thought that, people are going to want to see the movie either way. But let's just say this for anybody listening out there. If you go see it, you will be surprised and a little pleased at the end.
There you go. Right. That's all we'll say.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay, so it's a fantastic thing, and I think it would resonate with so many because my mother, and this is where I was going, and I can't remember if I finished this story, but my father, it was when he was a Republican, and today he'd probably be a Democrat. But in the meantime, without his presence and this shift to the right that has occurred, I feel like that my mother, in her allegiance to the GOP, has followed it wherever it went. And in some ways probably feeling that she's remaining consistent with what her beloved husband would be doing, because she's a bit patriarchalized.
Yeah.
And yet it ends up taking, we've got this phrase in our movement, kind of the atheist, anti-theist movement, Jen, that says, you'll always have good people doing good things. You'll always have bad people doing bad things. But in order for good people to do bad things, it requires religion. So that's one of the phrases that's kind of a buzz phrase in our movement. But I think that it's very similar to what we're seeing here with this type of nationalism or white supremacy or whatever. It's an ideology that takes an otherwise good person, makes them a bigot or makes them an asshole or a racist or just a mean spirit to an otherwise sweet person. And that's the befuddlement. I think that's the bewilderment that we are faced with. It's like, how did this happen? How did this good person?
Right.
And that's when you look under the hood and you dig a little deeper and you see that there's been this trickling of propaganda that's almost like an IV drip, been dripping into their brain day after day after day after day after day for year after year after year, and all of a sudden we have a Frankenstein on our hands.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Janet, maybe you thought about this too. You also have to look at just the way media itself has fractionalized, it's tiny, thin. There's no longer broadcasting. It's very narrow casting. They're looking for very specific white middle-class men between the ages of 60 and death, and those are the people we're going to program to. They've got money, they've got, power,
time,
or whatever, and we're going to get them, and we're going to, and more than anything else, they want to sell them shit. They want to make them buy stuff, and there's the rise of Fox News. There you go,
Mm-hmm.
You can wrap yourself in the flag and wrap yourself in Jesus and wrap yourself in right-wing ideology and make a profit at it too, because there's an audience out there,
Yeah, it's not just making a profit though. I mean, I think that their business is to sell an ideology to people who would not ordinarily go for that free market ideology.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you sell them that? Well, you have to lie to them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to use other techniques. You have to cajole them. You have to make them feel like they're your friend. And you have to show them enemies, other enemies.
Right.
And you have to brainwash them. That's what's happened.
A steady diet of that. And you put on some hot babes too.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You
right.
put these blonde, good-looking women on there, and
right.
I'm telling you, the audience is mostly. There's women too, but I mean, the majority are men, white men.
Yeah.
That look at this stuff.
Right.
All right. Well, Jen, the name of the documentary is The Brainwashing of My Dad. Jen Senko is our guest, and before we let go of you, I like to talk about or get under the hood, if you will, of the human side of our guests. And
Sure.
So some of the questions that we ask are, what are you reading right now?
I have this book that I had to come back to. It's called Combating Cult Mind Control, and it's by Stephen Hassan.
Okay.
He's a cult expert, and he actually was a Moonie. Remember Moonies?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so now he's a cult expert, and he had reached out to me, about my movie, and said, you have to fill it in with all this stuff about cults. It's very much what you're talking about is very much like a cult. But I told him it was too late for that, but that I'd read his book and mention him.
Yeah.
Okay.
And incorporate that stuff into my talks. So that's what I'm reading now. I also read Lies Incorporated by Ari Ravenhoft, which is about how a lot of these misconceptions or lies actually get out into the stratosphere, and like say you're a fur company, right? And let's say the Humane Society is saying fur hurts animals. Okay, so they might hire a PR guy to get a supposed research team together, data together, that makes the Humane Society look bad. So that's how a lot of these lies, I didn't explain that real well, but you know what I mean? That's how a lot of these lies are actually purposely manufactured, and they get out there and they stay out there. They don't even go away.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying. You're saying that the fur industry needs to stay in business, and they're getting this negative press about how damaging this is to animal cruelty. And so they've either got to come up with some data that says, oh no, this is actually, we're not hurting any population of species. These are animals that are dead anyway, or whatever.
We grow them that way.
Yeah.
Whatever. Or they've got to say that the people, whether it's PETA or whatever, that are going after us, they've got a corrupt CEO, and diminish the believability of their claims or whatever. So yeah, propaganda. And I think this is something that we need to mention, and I'm glad it's just now coming up here at the end. But some people might say the word brainwashing might be too strong a word. But Bob and I were on the porch just now just talking about how when you're arguing with someone of whom facts have no relevance,
that's true,
then you cannot have an argument that is any substance or is going to go anywhere. When you present a fact, and these are people that aren't bothered with facts. Their head is in the sand and has been for years. And so when you bring up a fact, it's not going to be a game changer like you'd hoped. They've already moved the goalpost. So this brainwashing term is actually legit, because you're kind of talking to somebody that's been lobotomized by their pre-existing idea, bias. and don't bother me with facts because I've already ignored facts for years. And so it's hard to reach those people.
Yeah. Right.
And that's very similar to what our main premise on this show is how we were duped by religion. I was an evangelical fundamentalist till I was 39. And I'm still the same guy. I still have the same IQ I always have. And I look back on those years and say, how and why? And, I look back on how was I duped for so long and how did it last for so long? And what kept me in the fold of that subculture for so long? And so it's very similar that we're looking at this ideology and the stronghold that it has on minds and hearts. And so it's similar.
Yeah. See, it sounds like a documentary to me.
Yeah. I call the past 30, 40 years the period of the great bamboozle.
Yeah. And I think it'll go down in history. I think, generations from now, obviously the Trump candidacy is going to go down in history as one of the weirdest chapters in American history. But the whole Fox movement leading up to such a thing as Trump. Like Trump would not exist without 30 years of groundwork laid by Fox News.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, I think so.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
And let's just hope he does not get in.
Well, I hear you. Yeah. I hear you 100%.
Okay, getting back to your personal life and just who is Jen Senko, what are some of the earliest memories you have of feeling awe and wonder?
Wow. I could tell you something really personal and really sort of religious.
Sure.
And I don't know how to explain it because I'm not religious, but I had a vision of the Virgin Mother when I was 7.
Wow.
I did. Yeah. I really did. I'll never forget it. That was an experience of awe that I had that to this day I can't explain it. I haven't had any other visions, you know.
When you say vision, you mean a dream? You had a dream at night or something?
When I was young, it took me hours to go to sleep. I was very hyper, mentally active child. And we were at the end of kind of a dirt road. And so it was rare that cars would come through. But if they did come through, light would come in through my windows, the head beams. So light started to come through. This all happened fast. And then it suddenly became extremely bright. And I looked up, and standing like head to toe in my window was the Virgin Mother in the typical garb with her arms outstretched. And the light that was coming from her was love. It was almost like if love were visible, it was that light. The light and the love were the same, and it just permeated the room. And I remember hanging out of my bed, clasping my hands together, going, "Oh, how beautiful." And
there you go.
I don't know. If that sounds crazy, then I'll come up with something else. And
well, you
can edit that out.
No, we won't edit that out. But you were fascinated with your grandmother's spirituality, and you know, it's interesting to me that when someone sees a vision of a human, in this case, a woman, I mean, how do we know it wasn't the girl from The Ring? You know, I mean, instead of framing it as I saw an image of a young teenage girl with her arms outstretched. I mean, what makes you think it was other than the pre-existing construct and scaffolding that you had to place that in?
Right. I told my mother about it, and for years I didn't tell anybody about it. I don't know why, but I told my mother, and she believed me, and she said, it's because you're special.
Well, of course.
And I don't know.
No.
So,
well, that's a message that we all love to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Exactly. So I don't know. You know, we're just human. We don't know what the fuck is going on in our heads or in the universe or this or that. And, you know, for whatever reason, I had that experience. And I guess I would say that'd be like a major awe moment.
For sure.
Sure.
And you're familiar with how unreliable our memories are. I mean, like they morph over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, that's where I'm going to have to go with something like that, because I don't believe in anything supernatural. And and if I were to say, wow, you saw a vision of, then I'd have to think about that. But I refuse to believe that it ever happened in any way, shape, or form. So other than in your imagination, and it morphs. So that's what I have to do to protect my pre-existing bias.
I must have been doing MDA then, because that was a dream unlike any other I ever had.
And you never had another one, apparently, huh?
No.
Huh. Well, okay.
No.
Well, I think you're special with or without that little experience. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, and you, unlike, sometimes we send people a form letter that's to all our guests before the show, and it's mostly something to help jumpstart them thinking about what they might say if we ask this. And you yourself, you filled it out and wrote it back, which I told you didn't have to, but you're like, oh, I think this is fun. And you did. You had fun doing it. But one of the things you answered to that question on paper was that you, as a young girl, you watched a movie called Fury.
Oh, yeah, right.
And you were intrigued with horses.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So there was some awe and wonder there around that species.
Yeah. No, I was in awe of horses. The Fury was like a TV show that I watched as often as I could. Mm-hmm. I was in awe of all animals. Mm-hmm. I liked Flipper.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I still
Flipper,
sing the song.
Lassie, Fury.
Yeah.
Mr. Ed.
Mr. Ed, I was just going to say that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's great, Jen. Do you go to movies? Do you go see movies? Or just your own?
I love movies.
Oh.
I could live movies. Like my favorite vacation is if I can go to a film festival and go to movies all day.
Very good.
Yeah.
I love that too. In fact, what I've done for myself on your birthday, sometimes, especially if it falls on a weekday, and you're not actually going to celebrate it with friends and family, and I, as a king for a day, I would go to a movie theater, one of those multi-screen movie theaters, pay one ticket price.
Yeah.
Sneak around. Yeah.
And then just literally watch 4 movies in a row or something. That actually excites me to think about.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I've done that with a friend of mine when we were really poor. We would just do that.
Yeah, pay for the first ticket and then just stay in the theater until midnight.
Yeah. They think that they stagger them so that you can't do that, but you can if you're sharp. Work it right. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Play the system a little bit there.
Yeah.
I get it.
Exactly. We all got to play the system a little.
Yeah.
So when you watch movies, are you one that watches with the subtitles on?
Yes, because I'm hard of hearing.
Oh, okay. Well, I watch them because I don't want to miss a word. Every word is important to me.
I feel that way too.
Yeah.
I feel that way too. And friends have said to me, you don't have to get every word, but it's like, I feel like I want to.
Well, somebody went through hard labor to produce every word and chose them by word for word, editing.
That's very true.
And
so I'm honoring that editor.
If you're a writer too, words mean a lot, because you're always thinking about rhythm and character and all those things, to make a person say it right.
Yeah.
So
it's an art form.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you watch TV with the words on too?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do too. Of course, we watch a lot of we watch stuff from Great Britain though. And it's like they talk so fast. It's hard to it's hard
I
to
know.
get it.
And sometimes the accent's so much you have to have the words on.
Exactly.
Yeah. But now I find that when I go to a movie, I miss that. Like in the theater. Like, where's the words?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, last question. Name a few things that that either nobody or very few people know that's unique.
Did I say anything before?
This is what's weird, is that I have your answers in front of me. I hate this. I don't want to do this.
Okay, so let me see if I can remember what they were.
All right, something about how long it takes you to get ready in the morning.
It does take me 2 hours to kind of get my full shit together. But then, I'm like, I get distracted easily. So I'm just doing various things. So it could take me 2 hours.
Are you one of those that, like, if you're trying to go somewhere and you're heading to the door and you see that there's a dirty sink in the dish or something, you're going to stop and fix that. Or
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. Yeah. Before, I feel like, I think that's why I used to be late a lot, is because it's like, oh, wait, I got to use all the time, as much as I can, like, I'll get things done. But now I actually end up leaving a little early, because then I started looking at like, oh, it feels luxurious when you're there early,
Yeah.
Wow.
So another answer to that question that you wrote in, it's kind of interesting. I think it's relevant to the movie, is that the movie is pretty, we have a lot of harsh, critical things to say about Fox News, of which one of their chief anchors is Bill O'Reilly. And I think of all of the anchors and all the pundits on there, he's an enigma. Like, there's a little bit about him that I don't understand why anybody likes him, because it's almost like and it's almost like I grew up in a real small town in Oklahoma, and you got a bunch of guys sitting around the coffee table at the coffee shop in the morning, and it's basically male gossip. I mean, they're just shooting the shit, and they think they know everything. They're armchair politicians and philosophers, and that's what he sounds like to me.
Yeah,
he sounds very armchairish. Like he just
bloviating,
Yeah, thinks more highly of his opinions and so-called wisdom than actually merits.
The tide goes in, the tide goes out. How do you explain that? Right?
And yet, there is, and I think this is a phenomenon. I think this is a psycho phenomenon that is like, there is something about him that is, I can't turn him off either. Like once you get him on, it's like, I gotta finish this segment to see what he's going to say next. So what are your thoughts on Bill O'Reilly?
Yeah, now I remember. I think what I wrote was, I don't hate Bill O'Reilly, right?
Yeah, right.
I think I might have written that. I do hate Sean Hannity.
I do too.
He's despicable. There's something annoyingly
malicious,
kind of, and I don't want to say nice about Bill O'Reilly, but I will say this. He has gone on Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, and he has argued his points. He's conceded his points.
Yeah.
Could you ever see Sean Hannity doing that?
No.
No, he's like Trump, Mr. Trump. Yeah, he is.
Sean Hannity is so harmful and so hateful. He's dangerous. Bill O'Reilly, I think, kind of sometimes has a teeny tiny tweak of humility.
Yeah, and humanity. Yeah. Well, I've said this before on the show, that there are people that I believe are absolutely acting like Robert De Niro. I mean, like, they're just acting. They know what buttons to push to make a lot of money. Rush Limbaugh is one of them.
Yeah.
And I think Hannity's one of them. But what I think we're saying about O'Reilly is a little. There's actually some soul left in that shell of a meat body, and that he might actually still have a core at home, and maybe naive, as opposed to, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm laughing all the way to the bank. He might actually have a little stitch of honesty left in him.
Yeah. He can be honest.
I don't know. I don't trust anything I see on TV.
Well, no matter who it is.
I don't care. No, yeah. I know it's show business. Everything. I worked in it for so many years. I know that, when Imus said nappy-headed hose, first thing the general manager did was say, "Nice job, Don. How about a coffee? How about
that's what he said behind closed doors.
How about some cocaine or whatever, Imus likes." Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's show business, man. Piss people off as much as you can. You get publicity. You get people talking about you. He just went over the line on that one. But those executives know exactly what Imus is up to. They know what Hannity's doing.
Yeah,
they know it, and they let him do it.
Yeah. So it's irresponsible.
Oh, absolutely, completely irresponsible. But they're looking to make money, So
yeah.
What's the difference in that and me breaking into someone's house and stealing for money?
I don't think there's any difference morally.
I don't either.
I know what the difference is. You'd get 10 years hard time for doing that and nothing for rewarded for doing
you get a 30
the
million golden parachute for
you get a slap on the back and a great raise or something for doing it. Yeah.
Or if they have to fire you, you get a big...
Well, like Michael Savage. Remember, you mentioned him in your movie, too. Michael Savage said some really terrible thing about little kids that have autism or something.
Yeah.
And, they're faking it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's outrageous. How dare you? And everybody talked about it, and they knew about Michael Savage, and then that's the kind of stuff that gets you a pat on the back.
Right.
I'm telling you.
It's an upside down morality, because some would say, oh my gosh, how he is so honest. I was thinking that.
Yeah.
But,
right.
And he's bold and brave enough to say it.
Yeah.
Right.
And what the managers say, what the sales managers say is you cut through. We can use that. We can sell stuff.
They're appealing to the lowest part of the mind.
Yeah.
You know, and as public servants, they've got an obligation to serve the public. These are public airwaves. They don't belong to them. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they're going to get reactions and feelings of like, oh, I can relate to them because they're appealing to the lower mind. They should be ashamed of themselves and appeal to the higher brain.
Yeah.
Instead, they're appealing to the amygdala.
Yeah, that's right, the lizard brain. But you even point out in your movie, too, man, with the collapse of the fairness doctrine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, anything goes, man. Pew, pew, pew. It's the Wild West, out there. And the fairness doctrine stops in, 87? And in 88, Rush Limbaugh rises. Mm-hmm. And there you go. Yep. So good point. Good point.
Yeah.
One last point about Jen here is you have 16 diaries from the time that you were in 8th grade to the time that in your late 20s, I guess you stopped.
Yeah.
And there's 16 of them, and you've kept them.
Yes.
That's great.
Somebody could make a documentary about those someday.
Isn't that crazy?
Posthumously.
Oh, my God. I can't believe I mentioned that. I forgot that I mentioned that. It was so long ago now. Yeah. I had to have journals. I had to keep them to keep my sanity.
Sure.
I mean, those are really rough times, like in your life, like your teens and your 20s.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, but your 20s are almost just as bad as your teens, and they're scarier because you're being tossed out of that womb.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever go back and look at them?
Sometimes when I go back to my mom's apartment, then I sometimes will take them out and look at them.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of them aren't really necessarily like this is what I did today, but a lot of them are just talking feelings out,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I used to be very insecure, so I was often talking about that and, how I'm insecure and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure, get you.
Yeah.
Well, Jen, thanks for making the movie, and thanks for coming on and letting us talk to you about it. I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate being on with you guys. You're both so fun, and you made me feel really comfortable. So
good.
Thanks, guys.
So that's our talk with Jen Senko. I'm grateful that she came on the show. I really believe in this documentary and all the work she did. I think it's incredibly enlightening, educational, and wish the world would watch it. I think the world would be a better place if they watched it and understood a little bit more about how people are manipulated by media. I want to say a couple of things. I've actually written something out, and so if you'll indulge me, I'd like to address something that I see happening both within Fox News and fake news, and similarly, religion. It has to do with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow defined 5 hierarchical needs, and it starts with the basic needs of food and shelter. That's number 1. That's the bottom of the pyramid. Second, security and safety. The third is community. The fourth is esteem. The fifth and top of the pyramid is self-actualization. But in light of today's show and the premise of the podcast, I want to point out how falling for counterfeit means of meeting these needs can hamstring you from ever really getting them met or achieving the top self-actualization. After all, it's not a leap for me to say you should be eating real food to get your needs met. You should have a real shelter over your head. So the same applies for some of these softer needs of self-esteem and community, that they should be real and they should be based on truth and facts. So the counterfeit means of meeting the third and fourth levels, community and self-esteem, keeps one from ever achieving self-actualization. This is where false ideologies come in. Both religion and Fox News play a role in this hijacking of personal growth. People can overlook a lot of nonsense associated with an organization if they've made friends within it. Churches are full of people that don't toe the party line of all 7 tenets of the church's statement of faith. They go back week to week because of the community and how it makes them feel. It's like the old theme song from Cheers says,
sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows your name.
So that's the third tier, community. The fourth tier has to do with self-respect or self-esteem. We all need a sense of contribution or value. This might include a felt need for strength, competence, independence, and/or freedom. These are true paths to the fifth need, self-actualization, but we can be tricked into thinking we have freedom when in fact we are slaves. We can believe that we're thinking for ourselves all the while we're being told what to think. We can be tricked into thinking we're strong when in fact we're weak. The church does this by conveying that God loves you uniquely. He knows the number of hairs on your head. He knit you together in your mother's womb. You're special. The music, the stained glass windows, the grand narrative from creation to apocalypse, the goosebumps all make a person feel alive and part of something bigger than themselves. All this was made with you in mind. But what if it's not true? What if life is not the intent or creation of a being, and we're all just accidents, that the universe doesn't know or care that we're here? Wouldn't it be important that we're getting our needs met by things that are true, that are real? Our self-esteem must be based on facts, or we've fallen for counterfeit girding of our existence. The banner under which we rally our community must be real. Fox News meets the esteem need by igniting the emotions, primarily fear and anger. When our brains light up with these emotions, they release dopamine and adrenaline, and we feel alive, powerful, and most importantly, we feel right. The need to be right cannot be underestimated, but it actually stunts our maturation, not fosters it. Yeah, you're exerting your energy, flexing your muscles, fighting your enemies, but they're not real. Fake news keeps people on an imaginary playground with imaginary battles and thus perpetual state of infancy. The need to be right is actually a place of insecurity. Part of getting comfortable in one's own skin is realizing that you're not afraid to be wrong. Thus, you're not afraid of research. You're not afraid of reading. You're not afraid of education. You're not afraid of exposing yourself to points of view that you haven't held before. The person with low self-esteem buries their head in the sand and closes their ears and hides their eyes from anything that might contradict their pre-existing bias. The most honest path to true self-esteem is thinking for oneself, doing the work yourself to build your beliefs. But this is hard work. Part of the difficulty is facing harsh realities, like the chaotic, absurd meaninglessness of life. Part of it is acknowledging that we all die, a permanent death, and will be forgotten in a few generations, as if we never existed. If a person cannot or will not exert the effort needed to face these realities, it can actually lower their self-esteem. Life is so complex, and navigating human problems is such an intricate labyrinth, that it's very attractive when someone offers to do your thinking for you and feeds you what to think and believe. Religious leaders and political pundits are eager to feed us. There is great wealth to be gained by creating followers. We all can get overwhelmed with our realities, and the temptation to bury our heads in the sand is powerful. But this is saying no to what is. There are many popular ideologies, including religion and partisan politics, that when adopted can trick you into falsely maintaining your self-esteem, self-respect, and self-righteousness in spite of your cowardice, incompetence, and sloth. I'm saying that Maslow's needs are real, and everybody knows it. We all want to feel alive and part of a community. I'm pointing out that there are people who understand that humans can be stupid and lazy and are eager to exploit us for personal gain by introducing deceitful pitfalls that can derail our heroic journey towards genuine self-esteem and authentic community. Don't fall for it. Smell it out, follow the greed, discern the liars, say yes to reality and no to falsehood, not the other way around. Jesus may have been right when he said, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." So that's our show. My thanks to Jen Senko for being our guest. I hope you'll download her documentary, The Brainwashing of My Dad. My thanks to my co-host Bob Pondillo. My thanks to all our Patreon supporters and those who donate on the website. It helps. I love you. We'll see you next week.